I think one of the things that we don't talk about enough is, teenage depression and how to recognize that in your own child who may be battling, moderate to severe depression on a consistent basis. Hi, my name is Dr. Natalie Jones. I'm a licensed therapist. I've been counseling women and men who've been victims or perpetrators of abuse for many years now. One of the things I wanted to get on here and talk about was teenagers, adolescents and teenagers that may be battling depression. And first I want to come on here and I want to say that a child that's battling severe depression or anxiety, that's not normal. Children at a baseline should be happy, healthy kids that are carefree. They don't have to worry. They should not have to worry about big things outside of, their friends, school, and hobby, and things like that. So if you have a child that is depressed or sad all the time, that is a clear indication that something is very wrong. And my motivation behind my video is there's a woman, and she made a video and she's talking to her teenager after she picked her up from school. And she's asking her teenager questions about school. And her child is giving her one-word answers. And I don't know if it's like a skit or parody or whatever, but she's like getting more and more frustrated with her child as she's driving her home. And because her child is giving her one-word answers and just seems to be like monotone or whatever. And then she asked her child, did she want to go to Starbucks? And all of a sudden she perks up. She's like, yeah, I'll go to Starbucks and blah, blah, blah. And so I didn't want to, stitch the video, because I don't want to give the impression that something's there if it's not. But sometimes what I did want to say that this is a good example. When your teen is like, their mood is just like very solemn, very even. There's never any change in their affect or their voice or anything like that. That could be a sign that your child is dealing with some depression. When your child is very resistant to conversation, especially if you would normally have a very sociable child, but your child is kind of like, they go to school and things like that, and they're very resistant to conversation, that could be an indication of depression. Going to school, there's a lot of things that go on in school. I haven't been to school in a long time, but I do remember myself going to school and just how there were so many different personalities. There's so many different things happening. There's cliques. There's bullying. There's in-group, out-group. There's competition. There's, stressing about getting into college and getting good grades. There could also be things going on at home. So I'm saying this all to say that, depression isn't always like, something neurological, brain chemistry. It can also be something that is situational to a person, place, thing, or situations. And so a lot of times it can happen, it could be, especially with children and adolescents and teenagers, it can be dependent upon what's going on in relationships. And I get on here and I talk a lot about abuse and relationships, and I have a lot of young followers. They make up almost half of my following, people from the 18 to 25 group, according to my analytics. And one of the things that, again, we don't talk about enough is how abuse can go on with teenagers in their relationships, with their friends, and they could be friends that they've known since grade school, and their parents, and they know, all that kind of stuff. But sometimes kids can face relational aggression within their relationships with their peers, and sometimes it's not with their friends. Sometimes it can be bullies, but there can also be mean girl clique, mean guy cliques, that kind of stuff. Just mean cliques everywhere, right? But there can also be people, you usually start finding out when people aren't your friends, right around that age in junior high and high school, where people are sort of talking about you, they're gossiping, they're excluding you. Your clothes and your shoes aren't up with the latest trends, or you're poor, that kind of stuff, so there can be bullying, all kinds of things. But there can also be stress that children have to worry about just in their own life, and just sort of feeling like, okay, am I adequate enough? Am I good enough? So just sort of, growing into themselves with hormones and changes. There can also be situational stressors at home. I'm going to do a separate video on this, but there are lots of children and teenagers that struggle with, just balancing life at home, who hate going home, who hate their parents, quite frankly, or who hate their families, or feel like they don't fit in and they don't belong. Or, if there's abuse going on in the home, like, I don't feel safe at home, and I'm not looking forward to going back there. I know that's hard for a lot of parents to hear, because I get parents on here chewing me out all the time. You're a crap therapist. This is family. This is real stuff. You need to grow up. Everybody's not being abused, blah, But the fact of the matter is, people are, and, you need to have. And there's, unfortunately, a lot of people don't have a mirror to show them, how they present themselves to other people, so parents speaking harshly to their kids, parents who have their children being the parents, parents who have their children worrying about paying their bills at a very early age. Children get depressed about this stuff, and I'm telling you because I know about it firsthand. This is my expertise. You may be a parent, but I've worked with children and I've worked with teenagers for quite a bit of time, and so I do know that they carry these struggles, and it's a very real thing. And a lot of times when they carry these struggles, they find out very quickly nobody gives a damn about hearing it. People aren't there to lend an ear, or your parents don't want to hear you gripe and complain, because a lot of times parents, without even realizing it, and this isn't a post to kind of get down on parents, this is a realistic post to tell you about some things that kids face every single day. There's a lot of times when kids try to talk to their parents, but parents will compare. Like, what do you got to be depressed about? What do you got to be anxious about? When I was your age, I was doing X, Y, and Z, and we didn't have no food to eat, and I had a slice of bread once a month, and that's all we ever had to eat. So what the hell do you have to be depressed about? This is a scenario. This is how things play out. There's also children who get depressed because their parents go and leave them, and they're gone for long periods of time, and so children are lonely, so latchkey children, things like that are left alone for long periods of time. So there's always things that can be bothering your child. So a child that's giving these one-word answers, a child that's not responsive or doesn't want to communicate to their parents, and have, they're not engaged, right? Something more could be going on, is what I'm trying to say. Your child could be depressed. It could be, it could be genuine depression, that maybe they may need medication for. They may need to talk to someone about it. And I'm not saying that there's disingenuine depression. What I'm saying is there can be situational depression versus a mood disorder that they're battling. But either way, they could still need to talk to someone. They may need professional assistance. They may not be able to open up to you about it. Children do get depressed. Children do get suicidal. That is a very real thing. Children do have and will commit suicide based on how they feel. And, so some of the things can certainly be a cry for help that should be taken seriously. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, follow, and share.